Hi, I'm Greg Ulan with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today, I'm really excited. I get to sit down and talk with Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News, and Kel Walker, who's the producer and co-host of the Automotive News Daily Drive podcast. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Glad to do it.
For having us.
Yep, absolutely. So I wanted to start just real quick. You guys host a podcast daily, which is pretty impressive, but a little bit on your background. So Jamie, maybe you can go first. You've been in the industry for a long time. You've been covering automotive for a long time, but maybe give a little of your background.
Yeah, I'm the old hand in the sea here. I've been on the auto beat for about 25 years, a little more than that now, I guess. Started my first auto show was Tokyo in '97. I was based in Lexington, Kentucky. You had the Lexington Herald-Leader, general interest newspaper. But of course, they have the Toyota plant nearby, and they launched the Sienna minivan, and I covered that job one ceremony, and then said, invited me to come to Tokyo. And I said, I can't go to Tokyo. It's too expensive. But my editor ended up finding the money to send me. It was a great learning experience, especially because Toyota was just launching the Prius, which is really the first, along with Honda's Clarity, with Honda's vehicle at the time, really the first hybrid. And they really couched it as a stepping stone, hybrid to electric vehicles to what ultimately fuel cells, which all kind of blew my mind. And, was something for me to try to understand and explain to my readers. After that stint in Kentucky, I went to Detroit. I was 8 years at the Detroit Free Press as a reporter, and then as the auto editor and business editor. Then I went to Bloomberg for 10 years, and now I've been at Automotive News for a little more than 4 years. Came in as chief content officer. We had some turnover, and now I'm executive editor. So it's and host of the Daily Drive podcast.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned Lexington. You went to Kentucky, is that right? UK?
I did. I started off in my hometown, Iowa City, Iowa, at the University of Iowa, but ended up getting my degree in finance from UK. Tried to learn the language of CFOs so I could translate it into English for newspaper readers.
So if I'm getting my timing right, you were there for a national championship, no?
I was indeed. One for Tubby, and I think also maybe one for Rick.
Yeah. No, that's fun stuff. Not necessarily the year this year to talk about UK basketball, but that's all right. I'm sure brings back fun memories.
Yeah.
Good. Kel, how about you? What's your background? I was looking at least and doing a little research before we sat down and talked. It looks like you've done everything in production out there. I mean, from broadcast to radio to podcast. So yeah, a little on your background would be great too.
Yeah. So it's funny. Jamie and I are kind of the odd couple that I feel like the automotive podcasting space needed. So my background originally is from radio. So I ran a top 40 radio station for about 13 and a half years in Seattle, now located in Las Vegas. Always been a lifelong car enthusiast. Cars have always been automotive, just the automotive space has just always been a part of my life since I was a kid. Everything from my grandfather to my cousins building cars to then myself working in a shop in my teenage years. But then after that stint I worked at Firestone actually for a while back in the day. I got into radio and from then on, just got into broadcasting. I had this other passion and love for music. And then after I got out of the radio business, I put my two passions together of production and I guess sound along with automotive space and cars. And so it's kind of become this match made out of in heaven, the two things that I love the most, audio, sound, production, and the automotive space. So in a short term, that's my background. But yeah, it's lifelong car enthusiast and production buff.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit. Maybe we can start at least with the Daily Drive podcast. So it's evolved over time, right? It was Weekend Drive going back a handful of years, and then it was really kind of that COVID timeframe, that March 2020 timeframe, when I believe you guys sort of flipped to daily as well, and have done a really good job keeping up that cadence. So maybe a little background on the history of the podcast and kind of where it's at today.
You're exactly right. It was a video interview show, the Weekend Drive, and it would be video, and there would be between executives that would come to Detroit, or, Jason Stein, our former publisher, would be traveling around the world. He'd grab an interview with somebody, and it'd be a chance for, viewers, listeners, just anyone who is curious, to get a little deeper conversation with a newsmaker who wasn't necessarily in the news that week, but just a good interview. And then when COVID hit, right, we couldn't have guests, we couldn't travel. But Jason started picking up the phone and just talking to people on the phone. And some of those early interviews, especially with, Jim Farley and Jose Munoz, talking, at pretty extensive length about their thinking process and how they were coping. But after, a year or so of the pandemic, like people started filling up their time in other ways, and it became harder to get a really meaty daily interview. And then Jason left, and it was just it was time to reboot. So we did a little research, and we thought about our own usage and, of folks within the team. And we said, okay, we really should do some. People need, headlines. It's good if we're going to do it daily, let's keep the daily news flow in it. But people like the interview aspect. Let's try to keep the length a little more manageable. It's hard to expect anyone to listen to 30 or 60 minutes of interview every day. So, and we put out a call for talent, thinking maybe I could find someone who could, produce the show, make me sound better, make us sound better. We got Kel and also Jake Neer, who a lot of folks in Detroit will know from his Detroit Public Radio time. And we're like, let's hire them both, because they're both super talented, very complementary skills. We're in a growth mode. So it's like, Kel can be more than an editor, right? He could be, because he brings automotive knowledge I don't have, like he could be a co-host. Like, let's do it that way. And that'll make it a better show. It'll be more interesting, gives us more backup. And actually having a 3-person team, if I'm on vacation, Jake and Kel can read the heads. If Kel's on vacation, Jake can sit in, or I can read all the headlines, and Jake does the editing. And we really cover for each other and work as a team. And it's allowed us to provide a much better product, double our audience, and try to take on some new projects.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I will say, I was really nervous going back. I think it was a little over a year ago. Would have been December of 21. I think you took a little hiatus, right? When you were doing that evaluation, you guys sent out a survey. You were going to take a month off and evaluate, and I got real nervous because I really like the format, right? I really like the podcast and the medium in general. I actually reached out and I was like, I'll guest host for like a month, just to fill this gap. Keep it going. Don't cancel it, And that wasn't needed, but I don't know. It's great to see you guys turn it around. And then, obviously right after that, Kel came on board. So I don't know, from your perspective, Kel, too, what has the, I guess this audience that you have now, how does it differ? What is it like for you? And how have you seen things change over the last 12 months or so?
It's actually, Greg, been a great transition, because it's a little step outside of my comfort zone, because it's journalism focused, and it's news oriented, and I come from this background of music and top 40, so I love the challenge, and I love the fact that I was able to take my skill set and it fit right into the peg for this type of format in this type of space. So it's good. And one thing I do love about the audience, though, is that the automotive audience is an audience that knows exactly what they want. Yeah. Right. And so since they know what they want, and, an automotive news and Crane is such a figurehead and a pillar in the automotive B2B space, we know exactly what it is to give them. So it's actually been a really good transition, and it's actually been moreover a quite natural transition. So I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I've been able to see and go places and experience things that I wasn't able to do back when I was, scheduling music. I was used to going to concerts and shows, and now I'm going to these really big auto shows and get to travel and meet all these really, really cool and really, really interesting people that are very, very passionate about the space. And that's the other thing that makes it so attractive, is just people in the automotive industry are so passionate about the business. And I love that. So it's been great.
Yeah, and I would add to, beyond being passionate, I mean, there's a lot of knowledge out there and a lot of different viewpoints, but This is an industry that I think really does a good job sharing and collaborating and trying to learn together. And that's something where when I look at what Automotive News does and what a lot of podcasts do and a lot of other even media publications do, it's trying to create an environment where people can learn, right? Where people can share and we can all grow and sort of get better together. So I'm curious if there was any, and I'm trying to frame this like a question. I'm doing a pretty poor job of it, but if there's any thought that was put into the format of the podcast to facilitate learning, I guess. You think about the way you guys have it set up. You have your headlines for the day, but then on the backside, you usually have some sort of interview or dialogue between the two of you. And in a lot of ways, people will dial in or listen to something like a podcast to learn, right? To pick up something beyond just a headline. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or if there's any thought put into that.
Can I take this one, Jamie? Jamie?
You start and I'll bring it home.
I think that is all based off of our interviews, and we're very particular about who we air and who we interview. And I give kudos to Jake Neer for that, because what I've noticed since I've been on is that all of our interviews, there's something you're going to take away from it. You're going to get something out of it. And that's the key to a successful podcast. So I would give kudos to Jake for that, because Jake knows how to pick and choose, like, maybe we talk to this cat next week. If this news story goes this way, then maybe we'll deal with that cat. But today, let's do this instead. And so, I think Jake managing that, and him coming from a background of public radio, also of knowing listenership and what people want to listen to and what people want to get and information they want to get out of the interview. I think Jake has been really, really good when it comes to that. So that's my take.
I think, the interview is important. I think also just it's a confluence, right, of news and journalism with, your own continuing education. I feel like everybody in the industry, especially if they have any ambition, if they want to move up within their job, within their company, if they're a department head at a dealership and they want to be a principal, you've got to arm yourself with knowledge and information. And it can't just be the information that comes from, the manufacturer or from vendors. You want a third party to funnel that, to keep you up to date. I can go into my whole sales pitch. It's not my job to sell subscriptions, but I believe really strongly in it. It's a great value, especially for people who are trying to build their career.
Yeah, well, and we all learn from experience, right? You go and do something, you learn from that experience. Either it worked or it didn't, and then you duplicate it or you stop doing it or you change it. But why not be able to learn from somebody else's experience too, right? And say, hey, this worked for me, this didn't work for me. And maybe you still try it if it didn't work for somebody else, but at least you have a new idea, right? Yeah. At least you have something else to go and try. So we don't have to all come up with different things on our own.
The other thing I would add, so being at Crane Communications, being at Automotive News, it's not the same as being at Bloomberg or at the Free Press. B2B communications, B2B news, you're rarely going to teach an engineer about engineering. But what you can do, especially within a really complicated industry like the auto industry, is help make sure that the marketing folks understand, what is happening with engineering and with digital retail. Make sure that the design people know what's going on with manufacturing, and making sure that you have a fuller awareness of the rest of the ecosystem. Right? We're not going to, like I said, we're not going to teach the designers what cool design is. They know so much more than I'm ever going to know, or than my whole team's going to know. But we can tell them what everybody else is working on, so they can see how their role and their life and their work fits in the greater whole. Yeah,
that's a good point. We talk about that all the time when we bring new hires on here, even is like, you have a lot to learn, right? Yes, you have a lot to learn about our company and our products and all that stuff, but more importantly, you have a lot to learn about our industry, our customers, and their problems, and it takes a long time to figure that stuff out. It's not to your point, it is a very complex industry when you think about the different layers, and even just at the retail layer. But then you factor in all the other pieces to the puzzle in the ecosystem. It's a lot. It is. There's layer after layer after layer.
Even within retail, it's just amazing and amazingly complex. And then you think about the changes in powertrains now, the changes in the way marketing is done. I mean, just so much. It's such a big industry, and it's going through a lot of change, and you need information that you can trust to keep up.
Yep, absolutely. So you guys have, the two of you specifically, but I guess the entire Automotive News team, you have a pretty wide perspective on the industry, I'd say. You get to look at it from a lot of different angles, right? Retailers, manufacturers, you look at the finance portion of the business, all the different pieces, M&A, there's just a ton going on out there. So with that perspective, because a lot of us don't necessarily get that broad perspective from all the different angles, give me maybe one thing each that you see in the next, I don't know, just say the future, whether it's probably near term at some point, year or so, you see with the potential to have an outsized impact on maybe one from a manufacturer's perspective and one from a retailer's perspective. Anything sitting out there that we could dive into a little bit?
I mean, as far as big developments in the next year, I think we have to look at, on the manufacturer side, we have to look at the labor situation in North America. The UAW and the Canadian Union Unifor are both heading into negotiations with the Detroit 3 or whatever you want to call them, GM, Ford, and Stellantis North America. I would bet there is going to be at least one strike. Workers feel like there's a big push for unionism these days. Workers feel like they've missed out. The inflation's been really high, and while they've gotten good profit sharing checks, the manufacturers have made record profits or near record profits, at least on an operating basis. And the workers are going to want some security. They're going to want all the usual investments, but they're hot, and they've also had a lot of turnover in the leadership. So how things can get resolved, I think that's going to be the challenge. Like, we know there's going to be a desire to act out and to push back, but how you can then bring people back to the table and come to a deal that can be voted on and approved, that's going to be a real challenge, especially if there's a whole new leadership team, which of course trickles down to everybody else in the industry. If there's a big strike at GM or Ford, that hits the suppliers, it hits the dealers, changes the competitive dynamic in the marketplace. On the retailer side, I think, there's a lot going on. The big question for me is just how much interest rates eat into demand. I felt like there was a lot of pent up demand. I think there are a lot of people who put off buying vehicles, but of course prices are high, and with interest rates getting higher, the monthly payments are getting higher, which is how a lot of people make their decisions. And I don't know, it's just going to be a lot of pressure, and it's going to be a challenge to keep making good profits for dealers as well.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Kel, you got anything to add on that? Right.
I would say from a retailer standpoint, I feel that, if we have the inventory, because we've all seen how inventory's kind of been fluctuating, that I feel like manufacturers are going to have to, or dealers are going to have to adopt the direct to consumer model. I don't think they're going to do it immediately, but I think in due time, with you seeing how Tesla's selling cars and they have mastered that model, that I think to compete, I think that they're going to have to adopt that model. Now, myself as a Tesla owner, I say this because it was a very, very seamless and very, very painless time when I bought my car. I did it all on my phone. I did it all from an app, and it was very, very easy. I didn't have to sit in an F&I office or sit in a dealership for 3, 4, 5 hours. So I think when the traditional manufacturers or companies, I guess, become more keen to this, that I think they're going to have to, at some point, adopt that model.
Interesting. Yeah. I think there's definitely potential there. I agree with you. I would layer in though that the dealer body will continue, I think, and needs to continue to evolve and find ways to add value to every transaction, right? So add value for both the manufacturer and add value for the consumer, because any place that you're taking value away, you're causing friction, not intentionally, right? It's just the way the processes work. Those are the things that consumers are going to want to eventually migrate away from. So. I would almost add in there, it doesn't necessarily have to be a manufacturer direct to consumer, but I would layer in, for the dealership, find ways to add value in that process, right? Find ways to make it seamless, find ways to make it easy, and find ways to, make that consumer feel like they're getting the perfect experience. Some of that's enabled by technology. Some of it is people, right? Traditionally, dealerships have added a lot of value through people and that interaction with the consumer. So it will be really interesting to see. You're right, though. When you look at Tesla and that growth, certainly manufacturers are recognizing that, man, they got something here. So how do we take advantage of it? And to me, I think the dealer can and will continue to find new ways to add value. And I think of it as like, there's this idea of the adjacent possible, right? It's not like, what's the next thing that's way out there? It's what can we tweak or what can we add in today? And over time, over the next 10 years, it'll look completely different. But today, what's that first step that we can take to do something different? I think of just these other areas of the dealership. You think of like finance and insurance, right? And that process, dealers really created that, right? It was how can we connect, first, it was how can we connect the consumer with the lender? Because a lot of consumers didn't know what to do. Even today, a lot of people don't know how to get a loan for a car. Right. They don't. So they rely on the dealer to do that. The dealer can help them do that. And they're providing value there. So that's a simple example and not a futuristic example, but continuing to find those ways, I think, will be fun to watch in our industry and fun to watch the dealer body continue to learn and grow. And all of us kind of play a role in that, I think.
Well, it's interesting you said that, Greg, because when I put my consumer hat on, I think of like my generation. So I'm 35 years old, right? 36 years old. And I'm in that generation of young, tech-friendly, that really, really big share of wallet, right? And when I think of like my generation, we're the generation of folks that are the instant gratification generation. So everything is coming quick. Everything's done on apps. My food can be delivered. A car can come pick me up. And when you say like, tweaking the experience, I understand that. But even if the experience is good, I don't want to sit somewhere for 4 hours. That's when I put my consumer hat on. As a consumer, it's like, I want to be able to get it, sign what I need to sign, and go. So I feel like tweaks do need to happen, but there's just something that when it comes to just the efficiency, that something just needs to pick up. And that's 100%. When I put my consumer hat on and I think like a consumer, because we report on this stuff, but at the same time, we're still consumers. Yeah. So that's kind of my logic when I say that, dealers are going to have to maybe, adjust to that direct consumer model. That makes sense.
100%. And I think the more that you can interact with the dealership on the phone, right? Or, not on the phone talking to them, but on your phone ordering something. Right. The more you can sign your paperwork. There's, how much paper. So if you print out a car deal, average car deal in the United States, you know how long it is?
That's ridiculous.
39 feet of paper. Yeah. A single copy, 39 feet of paper. That's signatures and initials and everything else on every single page. And you got a buyer and a co-buyer and a dealership representative. There's all this stuff that goes into it. So making those things easy, because to your point, going into an F&I office and sitting down and having a stack of paper, we call it thumpability, right? Is it thick enough to thump when you set it down on the table? You got a stack of paper that's got some thumpability to it. And that's intimidating. It takes a long time, right? I got stuff to do. I got to go pick up my kids, take them to soccer, do whatever. So that time consumption is a problem. So if we can make that easy, and the dealership can be involved and still connecting that consumer to that lender or that consumer to that insurance provider, but then do all the work on the back end where they're adding value, and you as the consumer can have the experience that you expect. The manufacturer, the lender, everybody else can get what they need and have it in an efficient way. And that dealership is the one facilitating that great experience. I think there's a value gap there that the dealer body can really exploit's the wrong word, but capitalize on, and fulfill that need.
Right.
You're not saying, because Kel, you're not saying that it should be, or that it needs to be the automaker selling directly to the customer. It's that the customer just needs an experience that is efficient and painless.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. When I sat and people asked me what was the process like to buy my Tesla, and I told them, their jaws were on the floor. They were like, "What? You sat in your bed and did what? They delivered your car they just delivered to your house and took your old car?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was the most painless experience of mine car shopping experience I've ever had in my life." So, I'm not saying that, they have to, but like, I would say, dealers got to just find, like you guys said, just little ways to just speed up and help that process and make that process not so painful and just not so long. Cause I mean, we've all done it. We've all sat in the car in the F&I office I think the fastest car, guys, I've ever bought was my Jeep. And that was like maybe 2.5 hours. And I was like, wow, that was fast compared to all of my other experiences buying a car in a dealership.
So with your experience, I'm curious, Kel, on buying a Tesla. So did you, just two questions, I guess. First of all, you said they picked up your car. So you did do a trade-in on the deal.
Right.
Okay. And then did you finance it or did you pay cash or have?
I paid cash. So
yeah.
So my situation is a little different. I know when you do finance, you have to go to like their Tesla location, and there's like a location where they kind of like hold everything and you fill out some stuff and then you can take your car. But since I bought mine cash, they just pulled it up to my house, took my Audi, put my Audi on the back of their truck, my trade, took it. And I had my key cards and everything. And I was like, "Here you go, Mr. Walker. You are the brand new owner of a Tesla Model 3.
That's awesome. No, I mean, it is, it's pretty cool what's possible. And I think, regardless of manufacturer and dealer, I think some of that technology is out there. And when it's right for that dealership or that manufacturer, that market, then I think everybody should have the opportunity to do that. It is, it's pretty cool what's possible. Did you drive it before you bought it?
I have friends that have them, so I've driven one before, but it did take me a minute to get used to the regenerative braking. And Jamie it was funny. Jamie was like, "It's going to take you exactly 15 minutes to figure it out," and that's exactly what it took, was 15 minutes, and I figured it out. But it's been a good experience so far. Like, I've been always a big German car buff, so like I've always like, outside of my Jeep, I've always liked Audis and Benzes and BMWs and things like that. But the Tesla so far has been good to me. I can't complain. We had a gas issue here in Las Vegas where a pipeline had gotten damaged. So there was no gasoline getting pumped into Clark County. And our governor we were in a state of emergency for like a day and a half because there was no gas. And there's these long gas lines. And I'm like, great, I can just go plug my car in at home. So, I mean, it's little wins like that make it worth it. So
there you go. That's good. So thinking about EVs and Tesla and this kind of evolution, pretty much every manufacturer has, at a minimum, launched an EV model, at a maximum set a date on when they're going to be all electric. And we're seeing some manufacturers toy with different ideas around different sales models for EVs, even going so far as to potentially have different kind of quote unquote companies for EVs where they don't have technically have a dealer body there. We can kind of read, read between the lines on what that means for the future. But Jamie, maybe you can take this one. I'm curious your perspective on, when we think about this and we think about the impact on especially retailing going forward, where do these chips end up falling, and how do you see, I'll say, the industry as a whole working together to land in a place that is the most positive for everybody involved?
With the transition to electrification, primarily,
Yeah,
are you thinking about? Yeah.
So with EVs, and then also really that manufacturer retailer relationship, and what that looks like. You look at GM's an example, right? So GM with their EV models, they're requiring an online retailing platform that dealers use or that consumers use to sell that vehicle. And that's how it has to be sold through there. So regardless of, what even DMS, a GM store is using, they have to use a second tool, which we've seen this story play out a lot in history, right? It doesn't ever work. It doesn't ever end up in a positive light historically. But I don't know. This one feels like it's a little different. I don't know.
It could be a little bit of a fulcrum. In the long run, I would imagine we'll end up going back to, or we'll end up with a system more like what we've had with on-site, dealerships stocking vehicles on site, at least a good number of them, maybe not as many, hopefully not as many as in the past. Yeah. But I don't really see myself. It's hard to see a lot of efficiency gains from the central stocking, except when you're in such an inventory scarce position, right? But in the end, we think about what are the advantages to the franchise system, and their manufacturers aren't going to get rid of that in the United States anytime soon. One of the advantages is you produce at the most efficient rate you can, and because you have a ready buyer, your vehicle is going to be sold as soon as it rolls out of your factory and onto the truck. It's signed off to them. It's on their books. You're booking the revenue. There's value to that. I know there's efficiencies in the direct model, and I think was it Jim Farley suggested maybe $2,000 worth of efficiencies that Tesla has in the retail process. There's also efficiency in the manufacturing to retail handoff in normal times. We aren't in normal times right now, and so there's a lot of change that's happening in such a dynamic moment that it's a little bit hard to tell. And maybe it is a fulcrum. Maybe it'll be the ultimate change, and they'll keep, GM and Hyundai and Toyota and Ford will all keep a handful of central stocking points, like giant, car Walmarts, around the country, and shoot them out overnight with, I don't know, autonomous trucks or something. But that seems a long ways away, and it doesn't really seem more efficient than taking the trucks, from the factory to the mixing yard to the dealership. Maybe you can eliminate some of the mixing yard stuff with some better AI logistics and all that. Dealership lots are not a bad place to store vehicles.
No,
in my analysis.
No, I would agree. And another layer to this that I don't hear talked about a lot is, pretty much every manufacturer has a captive lender, right? Mm-hmm. And a large portion of dealers use their captive lender to finance the inventory that's sitting on their lot. Right. So they're doing floor plan through Ford Motor Credit, or, fill in the blank. So when you follow the money, and especially when there is interest, like there is now, you gotta imagine that as the parent company, the manufacturer who has a captive lender that is making money. So to your point, you get the inventory off your books and it goes to the dealership lot, and then it sits there for 30 days. And then when it sells, you get paid interest on the loan that you gave the dealership to have that inventory sitting on their lot. So there is extra money there too that I think can be overlooked a little bit and doesn't necessarily.
Some of the inefficiency is actually money that you make through your captive.
Right. So I just when you look at it kind of really big picture, I think there's too many benefits across the board in the model that we have today. There's a lot of talk and a lot of pressure, and our dealers getting squeezed out, and I really struggle to see a world. Yes, we have to get better, right? And yes, it has to be more efficient. And to Kel's point, we need to be more consumer friendly, and that's something that I think will go on forever, right? We always continue to get better and find new ways. But how can we do it in a way that again makes it positive for everybody, and nobody's taking a punch to the gut.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's interesting. There's just so many layers. It's a lot of fun to kind of think through and talk about.
Yeah, very complex system. But I think about all the entrepreneurial talent at the dealerships around the country. That can be a real advantage for a brand.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Okay, well, hey, it's been fun. We kind of bounced all over the place a little bit, but I wanted to shift gears back real quick to what you guys are working on, what might be new coming this year at Automotive News. Obviously the brand and the company has evolved quite a bit, I would say, even in the last couple of years, with a lot of new offerings and a lot of digital offerings. And it seems that you've shifted quite a bit and come a long way from, the big paper magazine that comes out once a week to all of the different mediums that you're using now. So maybe talk a little bit about what's around the corner with Automotive News.
Yeah, well, we still do the printed paper, and I was amazed, especially last month at NADA, going around how many people told me they still love to read it have it in their hands. People who would come by the booth to grab the show dailies that we print daily during the NADA show. So that's still a remarkably strong business. I mean, compared to our peers, it's like we're doing great. But Of course, we know, I mean, there's a generational shift going on. The folks who are much younger than me, or you get to Kel's age, or a lot of like legitimate adults who don't buy their news in ink printed on paper. They get it on their phones, they get it on their laptops, they get it on their desktops. They're on Instagram. People are on social media. So we've built up our social media presence in a big way. We're retooling the way we manage our autonews.com, which has already been a really good site. I mean, you think about the fact that we have Bloomberg and Reuters wire services, as well as, my giant army of reporters and editors all around the world. It's an incredible value and a lot of stuff there. The thing is, it's a lot to read. It's more than most anybody can read. So it's finding then the niches and the targets and making sure that, the fixed ops audience knows that we have material for them, and that the used car manager knows that we have stuff for them to read that they wouldn't otherwise get. So we use the newsletter strategy to really focus in on the key targets, and, when people really want to go deep on one subject, they want to make sure they don't miss anything in the mobility space or in the used car space. We've got a newsletter for them. Of course, like I said, Instagram, Facebook, we're doing a lot more with LinkedIn Lives, where we'll do, live video with an interview and take questions from the audience. And we've had a lot of really good response to that. We have a huge LinkedIn community that we try to serve with that. And of course, the podcast, we already had a podcast, but it's with the new format, headlines and an interview, the whole thing less than 20 minutes. It's become a real habit for a lot of people. And we more than doubled our audience last year. And then this year, we're looking to do, obviously, a lot of great journalism projects throughout Automotive News, the whole group. But in particular, we're working on a project on carbon neutrality, and all the efforts that automakers, suppliers, even some retailers, are making, the commitments they're making to try to reduce their carbon output, get to a net zero, try to slow or stop global warming. What is the responsibility of the industry? What is being done? How do we know that it's working? Right? How do we audit those things? And we're doing that as a print project, or as a sort of a traditional project. But then we're going to take it another level in this fall, or late summer, early fall. We're planning to run a limited series of podcasts, really digging in on those issues, try to bring the voices of the industry leaders and scientists and policymakers into long story form. It's something we've done a few podcast series that are different from our ongoing news series. We've done a few things before in the past, but this is going to be a next level effort for us, and we're really looking forward to it.
I like that. So are the two of you? Go ahead, Kel.
Oh yes, Greg, be on the way for some very, very, very good storytelling. The long form podcast, I think, is going to be an amazing project. I'm not going to say it's going to be over the top, but it's going to be done very, very well. So people should definitely keep their ears out for that, because it's going to be a really, really cool project.
Nice. So are the two of you going to be involved? Or I guess the three, you mentioned Jake too. So will you guys all be kind of running that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So go
Jake's
ahead.
Jake's. It was kind of Jake's initiation of the idea, so he'll have a big role in that. But we'll all be cracking on it.
It'll definitely be a 3-headed monster project for sure. So it's going to be great. I'm excited for it.
Good. Congrats. So have you started recording and stuff, or is it still ideation? Are you going kind of big production where it's going to take a long time to get the content and then edit it down, or?
Reporting first, and then the actual interviews, and then a lot of editing and production.
Great. Well, congrats. That'll be fun. That'll be a fun project for sure. Well, what else, guys? What haven't we talked about that we should? Anything you want to touch on before we jump out of here?
The other thing I would say, sort of, big picture, and I guess to the extent, your listeners, if they are regular readers of automotive news or have been, or are occasional readers, we kind of reorganized the newsroom last year around, some sort of major themes. I call it making, thinking, and selling, or making, selling, and thinking. You got the automaker reporters and editors. We've got our retail team, and I just got to say, our retail team is awesome. I have more journalists covering auto retail at Auto News than I had covering the entire industry, at the Free Press or at Bloomberg. I think we have a bigger retail team than the Detroit News and Detroit Free Press combined have covering the whole auto industry. So it's we really serve that community, that part of our community. It's very important. And then the thinking is, I call it thinking, but it's, the ideation, the tech and innovation space. And, there have been a lot of people in that Silicon Valley world, Austin, Texas kind of world that maybe wanted to be identified as tech and not as automotive. Maybe they want automotive for the revenue, but they want investors to look at them as tech, where all of their fantasies are assumed to be true and and almost guaranteed. And so, that's been a challenging area for us, but we're really digging in. We've beefed up our team, giving a lot more coverage to that space, which is important both for, to cover them and show them that, hey, we pay attention to you and you should learn about the rest of the auto industry, but to make sure that the rest of the auto industry is really up to speed on, who are these players, who's coming into this space, and what are they after, what's their strategy. So that's something, we see as an area of growth. And in terms of our audience, again, I don't mean to keep going on, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity for us in the retail space to sell a lot more subscriptions, where, traditionally we sell a subscription to the dealer principal and he reads it and passes it around and maybe it goes to some of the other leaders. To my thinking, every department head at any decent dealership ought to be subscribing to automotive news and building their career that way. I think, as we get to where more people are getting digital subscriptions rather than the print ones, we should be getting 3, 4, 5, 6 subscriptions per store. That would be my dream.
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah. And the digital access to your point, it gives you visibility to whatever niche you want to have visibility to, right? You can have a full spectrum of content that you have available to you, or you could double down on certain areas and select which newsletters you want to get and select which content you want to have access to. So you can really tailor your experience to what your needs are.
Yeah, we really try to build out, and I'm sorry, I forgot to brag up about our video team, which we've also been rebuilding. But it's like we're trying to bring the stories in all the ways that people want to consume them, and try to make it easy for them to stay up to speed.
That's great. That's great. All right, Kel, anything else from you? Anything you want to hit on before we get out of here?
No, I just agree with Jamie. It's, we've put together this huge team of people. We have a ton of new hires that are hungry and that want to do a great job. And like Jamie said, is that we're hitting every single part of the business in the industry. And so, if you're in the automotive space, you work at a dealership or a manufacturer, there's just something in there for everybody to consume. At the same time, it's not over consuming. So we have a good balance. So.
Perfect. Well, on that, we'll wrap. I really appreciate both of your time today. It was a fun conversation. We went kind of all over the place, but those are usually the best ones. So I appreciate you going down those paths. But Jamie Butters and Kel Walker, thank you very much, and look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. We'll see you. Well, that was a fun conversation with Jamie Butters and Kel Walker from Automotive News. Those two do such a great job with the Daily Drive podcast. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. But before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to every episode of Connected on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcasts. And make sure to subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.